I'm going to record this video to Ed Davey. I'll send it. I don't know if he'll receive it or not, and I'll send it to the Lib Dems. But so, if you look at this elections map here, at least from these elections that have just been, it is clearly evident that the main Labour Party area, or what they call these Labour brick areas, is our area here, West Yorkshire, and possibly over towards Manchester, that in the middle of the country there. And this is basically part of the reason for that is everything to do with what I've been studying recently, to do with our ancient site and the history of the Liberal Party. And really, I know that the Labour Party was created and formed in London, but it did spread out since 1900 and moved up the country. And in our area, it started more in the Sheffield Barnsley area, and then it did go diagonally across. It has got to. There's so much of the issues to do with Labour and the Liberal Party, to do with the war and Winston Churchill, the name of Winston Churchill being from just over the other side of the hills, being so close to us, and the fact that there was issues with him being liberal but then going over a conservative or whatever happened, and he was close to the Queen, but then when the Queen ended up getting when the Queen got Queen's coronation and around that period, then there was this. That's when they built on our ancient site. But every single from the creation of Labour Party is when they built all those. That company went and built all the towers around England, particularly one on our hill, named the Victoria Tower. That really broke up the Liberal Party, and they all started voting independent. And it's almost like the Queen's coronation and the whole concept of building on the other hill fort. It's all tied into it. And it is this sense of this, when we've got the Civil War, the opposition between Liberals and Royalists, or Roundheads and Royalists, or Whigs and Toffs, and then it does go back further than that. But the thing is, the current Labour Party, this is the most important thing, right? The current Labour Party, it was invented and created, it was made, and then it built, it's been installed. It's like an installation, and the whole buildings that they built for the people, and all of the factories and mills that they made, and then the class that was created, the class that was created, more poorer working class people in greater numbers, is being installed into us, even around our area, and those people identify with that. I mean, look at George Galloway. He's got a workers' party. It's the workers' party. It should be even more workers' party than Labour. But the Labour Party aren't even going that way anymore, Keir Starmer. He's all about powerhouses. And, people aren't just, people aren't voting for George Galloway. He's got quite a few people who watch his show, but they aren't all starting to vote for his party and candidates popping up. George Galloway doesn't like the Liberal Democrats. But if you look at this map and look at the results of the last election, the Tories did really bad in the last election and they lost so many councillors. We didn't lose so many councillors here. It is a very dedicated Labour area. And what I don't think the Lib Dems kind of appreciate is that it's everything to do with the whole thread, or the whole. If you look at all those Al Jazeera investigations into the Labour Party, when there's meant to have been certain things going on behind the scenes, emails and so forth and so forth, that's part of it. But also part of it is like football and the local football teams and the local newspapers. This, Martin Shaw, who was, on the Examiner for so long, and now it's this Wayne Anchors guy. The whole attitude in Wayne Anchors is from Manchester. how the newspapers, it does a lot less copies than it used to do, because a lot more people are on social media. There's a lot of very, very big Facebook groups, like with 100,000 people, like that Ancient Tracts and Ridgeway of England. The Ridgeway and Ancient Tracts has got over 100,000 people in it now, but a lot of them are into the south of England. We've still got this sort of local newspaper press movement with certain key people in position, and I think that they're all strategic. And then you've got the whole football team, how the football team and football managers work with the councillors and the money that the government gives to this area, and then the whole sort of drinking sort of feeds into it as well. But I mean, if you look at some of the newspaper stories that come up on the Google News, in the south of England, just the attitude of the local newspapers, how they see their area, their general attitude to the area, ancient Neolithic sites and things like that, the pride of it, like in the West Country and in Wessex and in Wiltshire, it's just how they narrate it and how they sell it is just completely and totally different from in West Yorkshire, where this red area is here. They're still going on and on about Castle Hill and how, the Tandy brothers, cheated the planning permission and all the history of it, but they don't ask questions or be curious about any of the prehistory of it or any of the period before even 1900. I mean, they don't talk about the conquest. They don't talk about, the Norman invasion. They don't talk about the prehistoric things. They don't even mention it. There's just no interest at all. They don't weave the story. They don't talk about it. They don't even question it. Even if they don't know the answers of it, they don't even get people interested in it. This red area here, even in the newspapers and the local press, it's very, very much similar to Nigel Farage. How GB News and Nigel Farage have reinvented themselves. They sell this pub, we're going down the pub, let's have a pint with Farage. But it's kind of like a posh pub where, have a drink with Nigel Farage and, Barry Sheeman. You never have a pint with Barry Sheeman. The newspapers never sell a pint with Barry Sheeman. He's always kept, under hush-hush. Primarily, no comments on his YouTube channel. Barry Sheeman keeps a low profile on Huddersfield unless people go to see him. But yet all the money that he's got in, even though, the Labour Party haven't even been in the cabinet recently, but they seem to be getting all this money funneled into it. When we don't really want any building here, we want other places to be focused on building where, Northumbria or Cumbria, where, it's hardly been touched. It's not fair. I don't think that the Lib Dems are taking the election seriously. They're asking for money and they're, running for election, but you don't really see any new radical ideas or anything like that. I mean, Labour are highly competitive. They're highly strategic. Even now, after Jeremy Corbyn was kicked out of the Labour Party, I mean, Labour are so clued into culture strategically that even lists like Jason Williamson, who has got the Sleaford Mods band, they extracted him from the Labour Party because he's got a lot of influence in music, in the arts, in the music scene. He was removed from Labour because he was a supporter of Jeremy Corbyn and because of his music. The Labour Party, Keir Starmer, he's not stupid when it comes to culture and when it comes to voting. And all of these people, I think that in this area of West Yorkshire, everything from the councillors through to all of the buildings that they've been allowed to build, like all these new aviation buildings where all the locals in Mirfield were opposed, highly opposed, campaigning and they were blocked out of. They made them have small meeting rooms so people couldn't fit in. Once you've opposed to a building project like 2 or 3 times, or 2 or 3 times, they shouldn't be able to come back ever again with it. They just keep going until, you know, people are tired, exhausted, and these companies have just got throwing money at it, millions at it, and lawyers and so forth. There's a force that's bigger than the people who just the people. And even with social media, everything now on social media, block, 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 ban, ban, ban. It's almost as if it's created to cause arguments and make people separate together. If it could be as easy to just block, block, block the council by pressing buttons and voting, you know, like you could with the wind turbines, you know, one vote and then, you know, without the wind turbine opposite us, we didn't even know that they're going to be building it. That got snuck through without even, you know, seeing any planning notices for it, and it only needed one objection. Ed Davey needs. If I was Ed Davey has got some contacts. He's got an entire political party. It's bigger than the Green Party. He's meant to be the right on Ed Davey. He's in the Privy Council. He's meant to have contacts in Parliament and so forth. It needs to be strategic. I mean, and even now, if I upload this, you know, and don't put it on private, you know, that's kind of disclosing it. But this is the truth. And, you know, it's all to do with people. You know, look at these people in Wiltshire and so forth, in these newspapers down south. There are some Lib Dem areas on the map here down south. There's a lot of Lib Dem areas being won. I mean, Ed Davey, he needs to be looking into pulling strings, getting at least some of the Lib Dems who own businesses and some of them who are in the House of Lords. They want to be looking at trying to get someone, you know, into this Huddersfield Examiner who's from the south, or who's from, you know, Sussex or Wiltshire or somewhere, not Wayne Anchors from Manchester. You want to be trying to get someone into that newspaper, some people into that newspaper, a new editor, or buy it off them, or something like that, or at least some of the football teams like Dorchester. I don't know anything about football, but I know that, you know, some of these other football teams, Nottingham Forest. I mean, I know Nottingham is a very, very big city. It's, you know, to call Nottingham Forest, and, you know, although at least once you get into the countryside around Nottingham, there's a lot of countryside there, but the city's literally, I mean, they've got buildings all over the Nottingham Castle, the Rock, the trip to Jerusalem. I mean, it's rock solid with buildings, so to call it forest, but at least the sentiment's there, and it has got some surrounding countryside around it, you know. That's a little bit of a joke to say that they call it forest, but the thing with Huddersfield, calling it town, and the football, they don't call the football field Huddersfield. All the people refer to it as town. So everything's about town. The town is the main thing for everyone. But yet, there's loads of these places like Marsden, Slough, all of these beautiful places like Haworth, and that have got some history and culture, Home Firth, Sowerby Bridge, all of the surrounding places that still have got the beauty around them. We've got to be careful now, because the main government has been pumping money in to do up mills in Marsden and so forth, when some of those places already got voted to be some of the nicest places to live in Yorkshire. It doesn't want to be too much money overbuilt into there. I really think the whole thing, like, you know, Gail Bradbrook living in Stroud, she's an activist, she's from Yorkshire, but she lives in Stroud. Stroud is a place of the arts. You know, Extinction Rebellion, you know, have got a big presence in Stroud. We need people like, you know, Gail Bradbrook, who moved from Yorkshire to Stroud. You know, there needs to be some sort of movement. I don't think that Ed Davey is going to win any seats. The only reason we've got some Lib Dem seats around our area is because we've got some particular individuals like our councillor, the lady councillor we've got locally, who I kind of like her, but I've had a few issues with her recently just because I wanted to try to get some things put through the government, and I've kind of not really been on the ball with the communication. But she's been elected, and we need more people like that. I mean, almost very similar to Gail Bradbrook. I mean, the Lib Dems need to, for the sake of the country or the nation, some of these areas here, Ed Davey needs to think about, kind of like what Extinction Rebellion did, really, but not necessarily doing protests. The whole idea behind Extinction Rebellion, the art behind it, the people behind it, if the Lib Dems can do something like that, people, I think that Ed Davey needs to look at it like a lifelong project. Okay, we need to move some people into this area. What people have they got? I don't really think I don't want to be on the council because, firstly, I haven't been well recently, and there's a lot of things already being destroyed that I really liked, which is kind of like upsetting because there's less and less left to protect. But what we have got left needs protecting. Even people from Northumberland, I mean, you would have thought Neil Oliver. I mean, Neil Oliver's super, super proud of Scotland, but when he starts talking, he's always going on about Ivory Towers, which we have got a massive tower here. And he doesn't necessarily talk about it in the most positive view. I don't necessarily think that Scottish people are the answer to help save particularly certain areas of countryside in England or not. Although Neil Oliver claims to like all of England, all of it. I really think Ed Davey needs to. There's got to be some strategy to it. And I don't even think that Richard Tice is even thinking that strategically. I mean, his political party's been having problems with bank account. And then we're all having problems on YouTube with our videos when we're meant to be engaged in petitioning and politics, when it's casework, and when we need to gather evidence of public support by publishing notices, and the signatures and the ballots are evidence in a case to the government, just like in a criminal case or a case for elections is meant to be. The election proceedings is casework for sure. We're not getting enough help, with YouTube and so forth. I really, really think that there needs to be some strategy. It's been installed. I don't think Ed Davey quite gets how you can actually. It's almost like making things up out of plasticine and morphing things. It's an installation, and the biggest threat is that people like Elon Musk and, this World Economic Forum want to further install the mobile phones into our bodies, into chips. You've got to have a certain perspective and vision of seeing the world, how you look at it. And, all of the years that I was very interested in psychedelics and so forth, like Terence McKenna, there's a certain perspective change of seeing the world in what they call like a shamanic view of, energies or aspects, the way you perceive people and things, of, taking on things, like I said before, if you get two twins, right, and you install, if you get two twins and they're both the same, identical, right, like I say, if one is taken to France and grown up in France, it absorbs the culture into it, and the language and the even movements, facial expressions, certain things are absorbed into the being from its environment. it's like trees. Look, right, when you get like a sycamore tree or a birch tree or a fir conifer tree, the tree has a genetic and it grows into conifer trees and so forth, right? A conifer tree will grow into a conifer tree, right? But they aren't, all conifer trees aren't identical. It depends where they grow. All the branches are in a different configuration, right? So no tree is identical, but you can tell what species it is because they all have the characteristics of the species, right? This is kind of like what I was trying to explain to George Galloway the other day, but I kind of got a bit annoyed and angry, and and I think he kind of thought it was comical, but it's the truth. Another aspect of this is the class system. If you get twins and they grow up in a different class system, either middle class or working class or upper class, they take it on and absorb it into them, and certain, even if they're a smoker or something, if their skin gets cracked and so forth, there are mannerisms and language and behavioural things that are absorbed. And that's what the government want to change through mobile phone use and through behavioural changes and so forth. But, we don't really want everyone to grow up like Tories and with the attitude of, toffs like Boris Johnson, because they're not very honest people. They're quite frivolous with money. They abuse they're not very honest, and when they've got a system like, HM government, the petitions committee, for example, they run the rules all in their favour and not for anyone else, or, they want, charge money. They come across as well-spoken and polite, but it's a superficial politeness, which is, like Johnson, it's all superficial. They're not people of integrity. Then you get the middle class who kind of like are quite generally happy, positive, happy-go-lucky, or, they'll do things for people either way and so forth. But and then the working class, there are a lot of kind people, but then again, there are all these factors that come into it, the genetics and then how they've been brought up and so forth, and all these things affecting people, and as they grow up being installed onto them. And then you've got this whole thing with this, sexual thing that now's coming on, which I'm not the greatest fan of Ed Davies' view on that, but they're wanting to kind of like off-skew people even more. But what's happened to West Yorkshire, to this area, by installing the buildings and physically altering the appearance of the place, by having a lot of pubs and drinking places, by having certain football teams and supporters, and by installing these things, it's very much like the model of the Borg on Star Trek, and that is everything, because we've got Patrick Stewart here, and they even designed the university buildings in that shape and style. When they send us to Chinese restaurants, and Indians and a large amount of people are going there and eating it, it's been installed on you. And then you get, Dr. John Campbell is saying, all these diabetes type 1 and type 2 instances have shot through the roof recently, and then there's all the other issues. It's been installed onto us. And it's just the same as the difference between, a Frenchman and an Englishman, identical twins, you walk up to them. It's more than a difference in flavour. It's more than getting, a cup of coffee, and this is one flavour coffee and that's a different flavour of coffee, but it's still coffee, And the thing that George Galloway doesn't understand is that, in a way, the resentment of a lot of the working class for some middle class people or upper class people, there is a resentment, and that's why they vote Labour or will always vote Labour and won't vote Tory. So why aren't they voting for, George Galloway? Oh, it's a workers' class party. Why are they all jumping up now for joy and going, we'll vote for George Galloway now, tomorrow? I know he's got people watching his programme. We know that he's got some people funding it. But why don't they all just, jump straight up? Oh, he's a working class hero, George Galloway. They must not think that he's a working class hero. They're still Labour. Now, some of it's to do with the name of Labour or just the colour Labour, but Starmer is not Corbyn, that's for sure. But the current, what is now being built primarily and installed, this powerhouse thing, this yuppie culture, this barbecues and cans of Stella Artois and watching the football match and big screens and women just blocking people whenever they just, people in local communities or online, they've been given these mobile phones, like flicking through handbags and T-shirts, flick, and then, speaking to people on social media, block. It is a new yuppie culture that has been armed with these tools, and they're now kind of using them against everyone else. Everyone is... If you just watch GB News or if you just watch Talk TV, Politics Joe, everyone is literally fighting like cats and dogs now, arguing, bank accounts getting shut down with, even political parties, Tice, Reform UK. Then you've got even Andrew Bridgen and Matt Hancock, or even Tories are even fighting each other and defecting. They've got us at war with each other. And, the big companies, the Tory elite, that have got all the power controls, they're the ones who own the banks, they're the ones who own the contractors, they're the ones who they're the only people who submit building plans to councils are people who can afford it. All the people who own the businesses and companies, it's all a strategy, building all these aviation parts companies and building all these things, even though local people don't want them. One thing that we haven't got is that we can't just go onto a mobile phone and click a button and say, I don't want this built next to me, right? We can't do that. Why? Why is it when you go into Twitter and Facebook, you press a button and the only thing that pops up on a menu is block, ban, mute? Block, ban, mute. You can do it to anybody else. It's like having an AK-47. Block, ban, mute, block, ban, mute, block, ban, mute, right? But when it's the council doing something, why can't you just go block, ban, mute to the council? Like you can with the wind turbines. One objection. They're not giving us the power to do it. And even when you do object, even if you manage to not argue with your local area, even when you all object, the council chamber, they're saying your objections are invalid or not worth anything. They've got no weight or value to them when they have. And they're lying about the value of it. And the example of that is the Petitions Committee in Parliament. They're just lying. They're saying, we don't understand what you're asking. We don't understand what you're asking. So you set out the entire petition, right, to explain clearly what you're asking. Then they say, you can't do that. It's not something we can do. You can't do that. So then you submit the petition, set out, and you're only letting you use 500 words or whatever in this petition, right? Or a very small number of words. So you set out the petition, you say, I can do it, and this is how I can. I do it through this act, and because of this law, and because of this history, like, tumultuous petitioning act, and these acts are abolished, but clearly you can do it because of this previous law and procedure. And by the time you've explained it very thoroughly that it is something you can do, it is something you can have, you've spent all the words justifying that you can do it, but you haven't been able to write any words on what it is that you want, only that you can have it. You can have something, but the case for justifying that what it is that you're asking, so the Petitions Committee are they're limiting the strength of your case, because you can't even submit a proper case, any proper words. And they're just also lying like Boris Johnson. and I don't know if there's anyone intervening in it, if there's some other department that we don't know about, like, you know, when there was 77th Brigade, 77th Battalion with the social media. I don't know if it is Martin Day or whether it is this Labour Party woman from Newcastle, the chair, or what. But it after a while, you just don't want to read the emails because they're just like, you know, they just give rubbish answers or brick wall you. And this, but even people like me who have got, you know, I still submit things and send emails, but I just don't want to read the replies because I can't be bothered with it. It's defeating, but that's what they're doing. They're defeating you. But when you hear stories from Nigel Farage and from Tice, even when they submit things to the government, to Secretary of State or to Attorney Generals or to Chairman of Boards, and even they don't hear anything back from them for, you know, 12 months, 18 months, then it is some kind of like a little bit of condolence that, you know, it's not only you who have these issues, but, you know, people like Tyson Farage, you know, soldier on, you know, they've got very, very big social movements behind them, like Galloway and so forth, but not a large amount of the people are necessarily voting for them. There's a lot more people voting for Lib Dems in the ballot box than there are who vote for, you know, Workers' Party or Reform UK or Reclaim UK. But really, the characters, you know, Farage is a really, really well-known character, as is Tice now, and highly prolific on these programmes. Ed Davey is a lot more quieter. You don't see him. There's not this commotion around Ed Davey, you know, like from, you know, Politics Joe or from GB News so much, or Talk TV or any of the other channels. He's a lot more low-key, but it is a big party. But, you know, why am I talking about all these things? Because, you know, I don't think people are just going to vote even for Workers' Party or just vote for Lib Dems because of certain places. It's not just like the people. It's a combination of a lot of factors to do with a culture that's been built up brick by brick and installed, and therefore the people of the area have grown up in the surroundings. You know, they've been eating certain foods, fed certain things. You're actually growing something. You're actually cultivating something. Labour Party, since 1900, have built, grown and cultivated these Labour Party voters. And even now when Keir Starmer clearly is absolutely nothing to do with, he's got no real bearing or association to do with, you know, working class people, really, Keir Starmer. He's all about, you know, this new culture which is in the process of being built, which they're what they're doing is they're in a conversion process. The Labour Party and the government, the Tories, they're desperately creating a new Labour which needs to be what the Tory Party want to make it. And it can't be what George Galloway or Jeremy Corbyn want it to be, or, you know, the Liberals or whatever. It has to be what the Tories want it to be. Now, the Tories have taken a hit from, you know, losing over X thousand councillors because of all the things that have been going on, you know, all the lies from government. You know, they're claiming, you know, Ukraine and the war. But there's a lot more other serious things going on, like, you know, the truth coming out about a lot of things that were kept out of the main TV and press, like, you know, all the things that RFK Jr. were talking about and Marianne Williamson, you know, the industrial military complex, the elite, the big businesses taking over, the influence of things through mobile phones and all the rest of it, you know, and the food and the eating and the health issues. And I don't think that people are just going to go to the ballot box and just vote the other way straight away. Not in our area, at least. They clearly have done around the rest of England, but if you look at this map here, there's definitely something happening. There's something going on with this Labour instalment. And I definitely think that it's going to be difficult, in our area at least, to get people to not vote for the Labour Party, because it's sort of who they are. And I'm not saying that these people aren't nice and that I don't like these people, because I've actually spent a lot of my whole life in and around the working class people, but also middle class and upper class people as well, or all classes. But there is just, there are influences whereby they're just pumping out certain things that aren't helping. Like, the Huddersfield Examiner, the Yorkshire Post, the football. And I don't think those particular influences are as strong around the rest of the country, particularly not in the south, around the south coast. So I really, really think, it's not a matter of just giving money to the Lib Dems and throwing money at them and saying, oh, you can, put more adverts out there, you can print more badges and rosettes and, this and that. It's about the Labour Party are, all this Jason Williamson business and Corbyn, it's the Tories, everything the Tories are doing now, that they're buying things, they're putting planning permission, they're installing buildings. The buildings aren't just there to, like aeroplane buildings. It's not just there to provide aeroplane parts. It's not. Everything the Tories do is, it's poetic. It's got an intelligence to it. They don't just do it solely for manufacturing something. Everything from the name of the company, the place that it is, it's an ideology, it's a representation into the core of it. The royals, the whole process, the whole thing with the Queen's coronation and, building on our ancient site. The concept for TV programme Coronation Street was to win over the adoration of the working class to a television programme. Coronation Street, that programme is Labour. Probably the programme itself is probably, I would say, more important to the Labour Party than Keir Starmer. I would probably, if Jeremy Corbyn, disappeared from the face of planet Earth tomorrow and Keir Starmer did, it would matter less than if Coronation Street stopped being broadcast. If Coronation Street and, say EastEnders, and Emmerdale Farm probably even just stopped being broadcast, mainly Coronation Street, that would, and there was no programme again like it, that would have more of an effect on the Labour voting. All these local newspapers, Nigel Farage is pushing, Nigel Farage isn't supporting the Labour Party, but, he supports pubs and drinking. But still, pubs and drinking, that is a serious, important influencer on people, mainly because they get drunk quite a lot of the time and, it takes up a lot of their money. And then drinking always usually comes with or revolves around eating as well. And eating's not been helping people's health. No one's going to vote for a political party that's going to take away people's freedom to drink or freedom to eat whatever food they want and so forth. But you can try and, influence them towards healthy food or, towards things that are healthier for them. Even all through the football sponsorship, this Just Stop Oil, this Cable, Vince Gale, who, is in with energy companies, renewable energy, he puts a lot of money into Just Stop Oil, but he's connected with the Labour Party. But then again, it's Labour. So again, that's part of the Labour strategy, tying the Labour Party in with these political activist groups and so forth. I just don't, I don't think that Ed Davey is necessarily a strategist, because I think that if he was, he would have been, 5 years ago, 10 years ago, and I think that he would have been doing things that would have been having more of an effect, and I just think that, there needs to be some sort of, what are these Liberal Party House of Lords members actually doing out there? Am I overlooking some of it? Are they really Lib Dem supporters passionately? There needs to be some sort of, strategy. Strings are getting pulled all the time with local councils. They are doing deals with bus companies, coach companies, getting slogans on there. Getting Tracy Brabin elected for Labour for that mayor, even creating that mayor position for West Yorkshire. That YouTube, if it wasn't for YouTube, Tracy Brabin wouldn't have been as guaranteed to have get the position. Then, the Liberal Democrat alternative for the West Yorkshire mayor, the guy with the bald head, I forgot his name now, but I know who he is. I remember his campaign. He was on a lot of some videos and on TV, but he didn't put adverts out. No money was put into it. He's a really nice guy, and I really like him, and I really wanted him to win. But he was doing some sort of interviews, and he was like a little bit forgetful, and in a way, he's very much like, he's almost like a Verbs character, I don't think Richard Verbs supports political parties. He's kind of like really telling people really not to support political parties, although he has had like the Heritage Party on there. He's had, he's had the Heritage Party on there. He's had the Love Party on there. He's had some of these, really small, tiny, new political parties, alternative ones on there. So he is really open to having people on. The Lib Dems, for the strategy, they should be looking at, that the guy in North Yorkshire, who was, trying to get in the mayor of West Yorkshire election. He should be going on Verbs, because he's the type of guy that Verbs is, in a way, that going in that sort of direct, he's, within that sort of, I put him in within that sort of category of people. That's what the Lib Dems want to be looking at, contacting Verbs and getting that guy on there, trying to get Tracy Brabin voted out of the mayor position and so forth in West Yorkshire. Looking at, getting people into the newspaper, or starting, how much money have the Lib Dems got? Could they start up a newspaper, the Lib Dems? Or have they got some current people who are on their side in the newspaper business who could start concentrating on our area, that could do something that could be an alternative, to what the Examiner have been pumping out? I mean, I know the Yorkshire Post is in West Yorkshire, and it's a little bit more conservative and, North Yorkshire orientated. What's going on with the football? That's not my thing, because I don't really understand football, really. But that's part of what was pushing for having our ancient sites built on. There really needs to be some sort of recruiting going on for key people, and getting them to move into the area and doing alternative things. Like, I know that really newspapers in general aren't doing so well now that there are online forums and people are just watching YouTube, and all these independent channels are taking off. The major newspapers have been suffering, but our area for sure, I don't know what it is with that Yorkshire, that Huddersfield Examiner, but it definitely is it's something that is very, 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 very influential, and the football and the whole pubs and drinking thing. And a lot of the councillors, you know, we really could do with getting. There's got to be some people. I mean, look at Jodie Whittaker. They found Jodie Whittaker, didn't they, to be the Doctor Who character? You know, they had to find the right person who wanted to do it, and so forth. We don't even really know what's going on with the BBC because, you know, they're putting one, you know, they're playing one tune on the TV programmes and then in 1 minute, and then, you know, through the whole news and the BBC, then they're going the other way. You don't really know where you are with the BBC or what side they're on. Can we even, you know, can we even trust the Lib Dems? Are the Lib Dems even going to just, you know, this is it, you know? I vote Lib Dem, but, you know, I was even seriously looking at voting independent last time. For sure, there are certain things that should be being looked at. Barry Shearman, the whole fact that Barry Shearman he's been the MP his entire life. You know, things that man have been doing in Parliament. People like Barry Shearman really have been running the Labour Party more than Starmer or Corbyn. They've been keeping a low profile, but they've been the influence in the background all the time, getting all this money pumped into Huddersfield, millions and millions and millions. But then we're always complaining now, they had the town centre completely redone and done up, and now they're doing again. It never ends. There are some councils and areas that haven't even had any money or even really been that bothered. I mean, what are the MPs who have been in Dorchester been doing? If you look at it, you can go there, walk round it. I love it. It's brilliant. It's got an amazing skateboard park. It's got an amazing cinema. It's got amazing things. It's got fast food places. But if you just look at what's been happening to the surroundings, it's hasn't been spoiled at all. What is the strategy there? It's been Tory with some quite strong Liberal opposition, but whatever has been going on there, it has definitely not been going on around here. You know, since the 1900, since that Victoria Tower was built on our ancient site, everything changed. And, you know, George Galloway can't say what it was like in 1900 because he definitely wasn't here in 1900. Whether he was here in, you know, the 60s is a different matter. But he wasn't here in 1900, that's for sure. And he wasn't here in 18 or 17 or 1600. And if George Galloway was here in 16, you know, if George Galloway was here in the early 1600s, you know, the first part of the 1600s, he probably likely would have been involved in the Civil War. And then he'd have known about it, because, you know, he would have been having his electricity turned off in his building. You know, he would have known about why we had, you know, what the Whigs stood for versus the Toffs and so forth back then. That is for certain, you know, and he wouldn't be arguing with Corbyn and Starmer, you know, about barbecues and beers. And he wouldn't have been. He would have been less concerned about what was going on around the world in Iraq and Iran, in the Middle East, or in South America. If we were in civil war, maybe that was a distraction, you know, to what was going on elsewhere. I don't. If the Lib Dems would have had a strategy, the only strategy that I can see from the Lib Dems is that they've kind of been in place to be the Lib Dems and be in that position. You know, I mean, It's almost like they've been designed to be a minority party on purpose, and like, you know, the royal family like that, and the House of Lords like that, and you know, maybe Ed Davey. You know, I don't dislike Ed Davey at all, but whatever Ed Davey's been doing, you know, you see, look at you know, when they had the coalition government, we've got Nick Clegg. Now he's, you know, Facebook global president, or was global president for Facebook. Left politics, but he's an ex-deputy prime minister of England, and he's kind of like Tony Blair, having influence out in the world still. Statesman, or whatever, well, more than a statesman, he's like a world man. You know, Clegg had strategy, and the thing is, Clegg's been used in his strategy out in the world, but this is why I'm not sure whether we should trust the Lib Dems, because I don't necessarily think that Facebook is being liberal. I think Facebook is part of the problem of what the Tories are planning and doing. It's definitely not liberal when everyone's blocking and banning each other from everything, except they can't seem to be able to do that. The hierarchical powers we've been given in our mobile phones. You know, we can mow down, you know, everyone in the area, but we can't, you know, stop the council. We've been armed to fight each other and argue between each other. Alcohol, beer drinkers and Chinese curry lovers versus, you know, soccer fans, and versus, you know, walkers and hikers. It all seems that it's all in some sort of battle for our creature comforts, but the things that we're all in pursuit of are all set up to be detrimental to other people. If the things that everyone is after are really that good, then why aren't we all happy? The problem is that the pursuit of more and more Chinese meals and curries, it results in everyone getting ill, and ultimately being ill earlier in life, and more illness and dying. You know, and that can't really be good for anyone, because then there's more illness around and more need for hospitals and NHS and the rest of it, you know. But people want their freedom to do that. Some people aren't being as affected as other people, but they will end up being, you know, it just hasn't happened to them yet. You know, the Lib Dems need to look at something. If they seriously are, you know, different to the Labour Party, and they really, really want to do something about Labour, and it's really going to make a change, something other than what currently the Labour have been doing, which is just pumping insane amounts of money into an area, and then once they've got what they wanted, then say, all right, we're bored of it now, and now we're really going to make it decent. But yet, it doesn't, and all the time, it's been ruining what was there. I mean, how can Ed Davey, you know, Dorset is, you know, it's been fought for by the Lib Dems, but not won really properly from the Conservatives. But even the Conservatives in that area, you know, why is that? You know, is it like the Tower of Sauron hasn't, you know,